Welcome, everyone, to our deep dive into the world of flight.
Ooh, that's gonna be fun.
It is going to be fun. We're going to be looking at how humans went from dreaming of flying to creating this whole system of global aviation.
Yeah, from, Icarus to
Yeah.
the 747.
It really is incredible. And our guidebook for this is going to be the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge.
I love that book.
Uh,
It's a good one.
it is a good one. And it's a great starting point for this conversation because it really lays out the fundamentals.
Yeah.
So, when we think about flight, it's like, who hasn't looked up at a bird and been like, man, I want to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the early attempts at flight, a lot of them were really focused on trying to mimic birds.
Like Da Vinci.
Exactly. Like Da Vinci.
Yeah.
He had all these incredible designs for flying machines.
His notebooks are just amazing to look at.
They're incredible. But, they were all about flapping wings.
Yeah.
Which just shows, the power of observation,
Right.
but maybe not the best understanding of the actual principles of flight.
And there's also the question of the human body, right? Like, we're just not built to power flight like a bird.
No, no, no. Our muscles just aren't strong enough for that.
Like in the 1600s, Robert Hooke figured that out. He said,
Yeah.
forget it. We can't do this with our own muscles.
Yeah, it was kind of like a reality check,
Yeah.
but it really forced people to start thinking differently about how to achieve flight.
So what did they look at next?
Well, think about this, kites.
Kites.
Kites. Those simple toys actually played a huge role in our understanding of flight.
I never really thought about that.
Yeah, they were super important. They helped us figure out lift and control, which are like the building blocks of heavier than air flight.
So kites were kind of like the stepping stone to gliders.
Exactly. And there's this guy, Sir George Cayley, who was obsessed with kites.
He's called like the father of aerial navigation. Right.
Yeah, he's the man. He spent his whole life studying these principles of flight. And he was convinced that kite-shaped wings were the way to go.
And he was right.
He was so right. His work really laid the foundation for everything that came after.
Okay, so we've got Kaylee figuring out these fundamental principles.
Right.
But then there's the big one, the Wright brothers.
Oh, yeah. We can't forget about the Wright brothers.
That 12-second flight at Kitty Hawk in 1903, I mean, that just changed everything.
Absolutely. It wasn't just a personal achievement. It was the beginning of a whole new era.
What happened after that? After the world kind of stopped and went, whoa, they did it.
Well, I think people started to see the potential of flight, not just as a novelty, but as something that could actually be practical.
Like how?
Well, take commercial aviation, for example.
Okay.
The St. Petersburg-Tampa airboat line started in 1914. That was the first scheduled airline in the U.S.
Wait a minute, 1914, that was only like 11 years after the Wright brothers' first flight.
I know,
Right.
right? It's incredible how quickly things moved.
So tell me more about this airboat line. What was it like?
Well, it was pretty short-lived. It only operated for 4 months.
Oh.
But it proved something really important. That commercial air travel was actually possible.
What was the flight like?
Well, it was a 23-minute trip across the waterway.
Just 23 minutes.
Yeah. And the first ticket sold for $400.
Wow. That's a lot of money, even now.
Especially back then, right?
So even though this airline didn't last very long, it had a big impact.
It really did. It sparked a lot of interest and investment in the field.
So from there, aviation really took off.
It did. But it got a bit of a boost from an unexpected source, World War I.
Oh, yeah. The war really accelerated the development of aircraft.
Exactly. Suddenly, there was a need for planes for reconnaissance, for fighting for bombing.
And that's also around the time we see the emergence of airmail.
Yeah, the Army started using airmail as a way to train pilots.
So it was like a practical application for something they were already doing.
Exactly. And then it transitioned to the U.S. Postal Service.
And that led to the development of more air routes.
Right. In 1921, the transcontinental mail route was established.
So they were flying mail from one coast to the other.
Yeah, it was over 600 miles, with 13 stops along the way.
Wow.
Can you imagine flying across the country in one of those early planes?
I can't even imagine flying across the country in one of those planes now.
No kidding.
Right.
But those early pilots were tough.
They had to be.
But with all this growth in aviation, people started to get concerned about safety.
Yeah, that makes sense. It was a brand new industry. There weren't really any rules.
Exactly. And that's where the Air Commerce Act of 1926 comes in.
So this was the first attempt to regulate aviation in the U.S.
It was. It marked the beginning of government oversight for aviation safety.
And that led to the creation of the aeronautics branch.
Right, which later became the Bureau of Air Commerce.
So what did they do?
Well, they were responsible for a lot of things, like establishing air traffic rules,
Okay.
issuing pilot licenses,
Makes sense.
certifying aircraft, establishing airways, and operating navigational aids.
So basically, they were laying the groundwork for what would eventually become the FAA.
Exactly. They were pioneers in a lot of ways.
What about navigation back then? What did they use before GPS?
Well, imagine this. They had these beacon towers every 10 miles.
Beacon towers.
Yeah, with rotating lights.
Yeah.
And coded flashes.
So pilots had to fly from beacon to beacon?
Yep, pretty much. It was a far cry from the technology we have today.
Yeah.
But it was a start.
It's amazing how much progress was made in those early years.
It really is. There was so much innovation and experimentation.
And in 1927, we see the first pilot license and the first airworthiness certificate issued.
Yeah, that was a big year. It marked a real turning point in the development of a structured aviation system.
And things just kept moving from there.
Oh, yeah. The industry was growing so fast.
It must have been exciting to be part of it all.
Oh, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
But it also became clear that the existing system wasn't really equipped to handle the increasing complexity of aviation.
So they needed something more robust.
Yeah, something that could keep up with the rapid pace of change.
And that led to the Civil Aeronautics Act of 1938.
Exactly. This act created the Civil Aeronautics Authority and the Civil Aeronautics Board.
So they were separating the responsibilities for safety and economic control.
Right. Which made a lot of sense. The industry was getting too big and too complex for one agency to handle everything.
And this all sets the stage for the post-World War II aviation boom.
Absolutely. After the war, air travel exploded.
Why was that?
Well, there are a few reasons.
Okay.
First of all, you had larger, faster aircraft being developed.
I'm guessing technology from the war played a role in that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And then you had the rise of the middle class. More people could afford to fly.
And air travel became more accessible.
Exactly. And all of this led to a need for even more regulation and oversight.
So this system had to keep evolving to keep up with the demands of the industry.
Right. It was a constant process of adaptation and innovation.
It still is in a lot of ways.
Yeah, aviation is always changing.
But those early pioneers really laid the foundation for everything we have today.
They did. And their story is a testament to human ingenuity and our enduring desire to take to the skies. So all of these factors led to the creation of the Federal Aviation Agency, the FAA, in 1958.
So we really needed a more centralized approach to keep everything safe and organized up there.
Exactly. And the Federal Aviation Act of 1958, that really changed the game. I mean, it gave the FAA this huge responsibility to regulate pretty much every aspect of civil aviation.
So we're talking about everything from like designing and building the planes to training the pilots to making sure the airlines are running smoothly.
Exactly. Everything. And this was a massive step forward, to create this unified and comprehensive system for safety and efficiency in our skies.
So who was the first person to head up this brand new FAA?
That was General Elwood Richard Pete Quesada.
Pete Quesada.
Yeah. Talk about a high-pressure job. I mean, you needed someone with some serious vision, a deep understanding of the challenges facing this booming industry.
Yeah, he must have had his work cut out for him.
He did. But he was a real leader, a visionary. He knew we needed a strong, centralized authority to ensure safety and to keep up with all these rapid changes that were happening in aviation.
It sounds like he really set the stage for the FAA we know today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the FAA's story isn't just about establishing regulations and oversight. It's also about adapting to new challenges and changes in the industry.
Like what?
Well, think about the Airline Deregulation Act of 1978. That had a huge impact on commercial aviation.
Yeah, deregulation. That was a pretty controversial move.
It was. It really shook things up. Basically, the government stepped back from controlling things like fares and routes and schedules.
So the airlines had more freedom to do what they wanted.
Right. And it led to a lot more competition.
So did that mean cheaper flights for passengers?
In a lot of cases, yes. Deregulation definitely led to lower prices and more choices for consumers.
But there's always a but.
There's always a but.
Right.
Some people argue that it led to a decline in service quality, and maybe even some safety concerns as airlines tried to cut costs to compete.
That makes sense. It's a complicated issue with valid points on both sides.
Exactly. It's not a simple black and white situation.
But regardless of how you feel about it, deregulation definitely reshaped the industry, and its effects are still felt today.
Absolutely. No doubt about it.
Okay, so let's fast forward to the present. What's the FAA's main focus these days?
Well, safety is still at the very top of the list.
Of course.
Their mission is to promote and ensure the highest levels of aviation safety through this really comprehensive system of regulations and standards.
Okay, so they're the rule makers.
In a lot of ways, yes.
Yeah.
And the foundation for all those rules is the Code of Federal Regulations, specifically Title 14, which deals with aeronautics in space.
Title 14, that sounds pretty intense.
It's comprehensive, for sure,
Hmm.
but it's necessary. Aviation is incredibly complex. And to ensure safety, everyone needs to be on the same page and following the same rules.
So it's like a giant rule book for everything aviation.
Pretty much. It covers everything from aircraft manufacturers to pilots to mechanics.
So give me some examples. What are some of the specific things covered in Title 14?
Well, there's Part 61, which covers pilot certification, so all the requirements you need to meet to become a pilot. Then there's Part 91, which deals with general flight rules. So the rules of the road, so to speak, for flying in the National Airspace System.
Makes sense.
And then there's Part 43, which covers aircraft maintenance, so making sure that planes are safe to fly.
It's interesting how they break it down into all these different parts.
It's all about organization and making sure everything is covered.
So it's not just about setting the rules. The FAA also plays a big role in making sure those rules are followed.
Right. They have a huge responsibility in terms of certification and oversight.
What does that involve?
Well, they certify pilots, air operators, air agencies, maintenance technicians, pretty much anyone and everyone involved in aviation.
So it's like a stamp of approval.
Exactly. It's
Ah.
a rigorous process.
Yeah.
And it helps to ensure a certain level of safety and expertise across the industry.
So it's all about maintaining those high standards.
Absolutely. And they have specific programs to help promote safety too.
Like what?
Well, there's the FAA Safety Team, or FAST Team for short. Yeah, their focus is on proactive safety education and outreach. So they work directly with pilots, mechanics, and other aviation professionals to try to prevent accidents before they happen.
So it's not just about punishing people who make mistakes. It's about preventing those mistakes from happening in the first place.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture of safety within the aviation community.
How do they do that?
Well, they offer workshops, seminars, safety briefings, all sorts of resources to keep safety top of mind and to encourage continuous learning and improvement.
That's great. So the FAA is really committed to supporting the aviation community.
They are. They provide a ton of resources to pilots and anyone interested in aviation.
Like what?
Well, one of the most important publications is the Aeronautical Information Manual, or AIM.
The AIM, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's basically the pilot's Bible. It has everything you need to know about airspace regulations, procedures, flight safety, you name it.
So it's a pretty essential resource.
Oh yeah, absolutely essential.
What about the FAA handbooks?
Those are great too. They cover a wide range of specialized topics.
Like what kind of topics?
But everything from instrument flying to aircraft systems to weather.
So they're a good way for pilots to deepen their knowledge in specific areas.
Exactly. Or to just brush up on their skills.
It's like continuing education for pilots.
Yeah, pretty much. And then there are advisory circulars, or ACs.
What are those for?
They provide additional guidance and clarification on specific regulations.
So they help pilots understand the why behind the rules.
Right, and how to apply those rules in different situations.
That's helpful.
Yeah, they're not mandatory, but they're a valuable resource for pilots.
So they're kind of like insider tips from the FAA.
In a way,
Yeah.
yes. And on top of all that, the FAA also manages aircraft registration and airman records.
So they're keeping track of every plane and every pilot in the U.S.
Exactly. They have a huge database with information on everything.
That must be a lot of data to manage.
It is. It's a logistical challenge, for sure. But it's crucial for maintaining safety and accountability.
So they're like the keepers of all the aviation records.
You could say that.
Yeah.
And of course, they also enforce the safety regulations.
So they're making sure everyone is playing by the rules.
Right. They conduct inspections, investigations, and if necessary, they take enforcement action against those who violate the rules.
That's important.
It is. It helps to keep everyone honest, and it ensures that those who put safety at risk face consequences.
So the FAA has a lot of responsibilities.
They do. They play a critical role in keeping our skies safe.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit. I want to talk about how aircraft are classified and the different pilot certificates that are available.
Sure. It can be a little confusing at first.
It is. There are a lot of different categories and subcategories.
There are, but essentially aircraft are classified based on a few key factors.
Like what?
Their design, their weight, their intended use.
So there's a system for all of this.
There is. The FAA has a whole system for classifying aircraft.
Oh, okay, so walk me through it.
Well, it starts with broad categories like airplane, rotorcraft, glider, lighter than air.
Those are the big ones.
Right. And then within each of those categories, there are further distinctions based on size and weight.
So you've got large aircraft, small aircraft, light sport aircraft.
Exactly. And then you have the pilot certifications, which are tailored to the specific aircraft types and operations.
So if you want to fly a certain type of plane, you need a certain type of certificate.
Exactly. Each certificate comes with its own set of requirements, privileges, and limitations.
It makes sense to have that kind of structure.
It does. It helps to ensure that pilots are properly trained and qualified to fly the aircraft they're operating.
So let's talk about some of the most common pilot certificates.
Sure, one of the most popular entry-level options is the Sport Pilot Certificate.
What can you do with that?
It's great for recreational flying. You can fly light sport aircraft during the day in good weather.
Sounds fun.
It is. It's a great way to get started in aviation.
Then what?
Well, then there's the Recreational Pilot Certificate.
What's the difference between that and sport pilot?
The Recreational Pilot Certificate allows for a bit more flexibility and privileges.
Like what?
You can fly a wider range of aircraft, and you can carry passengers,
Okay.
but there are still some limitations.
Like what?
You can't fly at night or in busy airspace.
Got it. So what about the private pilot certificate?
That's the most common type of certificate. It allows you to fly for personal use and carry passengers.
So that's the one you need if you want to fly your own plane.
Exactly.
What about if you want to fly for a living?
Then you need a commercial pilot certificate,
That allows you to get paid to fly.
right? You can work for regional airlines, cargo carriers, flight schools.
And then there's the airline transport pilot certificate.
That's the top of the line.
Yeah.
That's what you need to fly for a major airline.
It's the gold standard for professional pilots.
Exactly. It's a very demanding certificate to obtain,
It sounds like it.
but it's also very rewarding.
Okay, so let's say someone is listening to this and they're thinking, I want to become a pilot. Where do they even begin?
The first step is finding a good flight school.
So how do you choose a flight school?
Well, there are a lot of factors to consider.
Like what?
The type of certificate you're interested in, the time commitment you're willing to make, the cost of training, and of course the quality of instruction.
So do your research.
Absolutely. Don't just go with the cheapest option. You want to make sure you're getting a good education.
Talk to other pilots.
Yeah. Talk to people who have been through the process. Visit different schools. Talk to instructors. Get a feel for the learning environment.
That makes sense.
And once you found a good flight school, the next step is finding a certificated flight instructor, or CFI.
What's a CFI?
A CFI is a certified flight instructor. They're the ones who will teach you how to fly.
Okay, so they're like your teacher.
Exactly. You're your mentor, your guide, your biggest advocate.
So how do you find a good CFI?
Well, you want to look for someone who is knowledgeable and experienced, of course.
Makes sense.
But just as important is finding someone who is a good communicator, someone you feel comfortable learning from.
So it's about finding the right fit.
Exactly. You're going to be spending a lot of time with your CFI, so you want to make sure it's a good relationship.
So once you've found a school and a CFI, you're ready to start your journey to becoming a pilot.
That's right. It's an exciting journey.
What are the steps involved?
Well, first you need to obtain a student pilot certificate.
What's that?
It's basically permission from the FAA to start flight training.
Okay.
Then you need to meet the medical certification requirements.
So you have to be physically fit to fly.
Right. You'll need to have a physical exam with an FAA designated medical examiner.
Okay, what happens after that?
Then the real training begins. You'll start ground school and flight training.
What's ground school?
Ground school is where you learn all the theoretical stuff, like aerodynamics, meteorology, navigation regulations.
So it's the classroom portion of the training.
Exactly. And then flight training is where you actually get behind the controls.
That's the fun part.
It is. It's where you put all that knowledge from ground school into practice.
And you work one-on-one with your CFI.
Right. You'll spend a lot of time with your CFI. They'll teach you everything you need to know.
So you're building your skills and your confidence.
Exactly.
Are there any tests involved?
Oh, yes. You'll need to pass both a written knowledge test and a practical flight test.
What's a practical flight test?
It's also known as a check ride. It's where an FAA examiner evaluates your flying skills.
So you have to prove that you can actually fly the plane.
Right, and that you can do it safely.
It sounds challenging.
It is. It's a rigorous process.
But it's also incredibly rewarding.
It is. There's nothing quite like the feeling of taking to the skies for the first time as a pilot. Yeah, it really is just the first step on a much longer journey.
So earning that pilot's license is kind of like a gateway to a whole world of opportunities.
Exactly. Aviation is all about continuous learning. There's always something new to learn, a new rating to earn a different type of aircraft to master, or a new skill to refine.
You never really stop learning.
Nope. And that's part of what makes it so exciting.
So what kind of paths can a pilot take after earning that first certificate?
Well, some pilots choose to specialize in a particular area of aviation. Like they might become flight instructors and share their passion and knowledge with new pilots, or they might pursue careers in commercial aviation, flying for regional airlines or cargo carriers.
And then there are those who dream of flying those big passenger jets.
Exactly. Some set their sights on becoming airline pilots, flying for major airlines all over the world.
So there's really a path for everyone.
There is. And no matter what path you choose, you become part of this incredible community.
The aviation community.
Yeah, it's a pretty tight-knit group.
Hmm.
Pilots share this unique bond, this passion for the freedom and wonder of flight.
It's like a global fraternity.
It is. And it doesn't matter if you're flying a small Cessna or a Boeing 747. There's this sense of camaraderie and shared experience that transcends borders and cultures.
That's pretty cool. So looking ahead, what do you think the future holds for aviation?
Man, that's a great question. The future of aviation is filled with so many possibilities.
Like what?
Well, we're already starting to see electric aircrafts and autonomous flight technologies emerging.
So you're saying we might have self-flying planes someday?
It's definitely a possibility. And who knows, maybe we'll even have personal flying vehicles zipping through the skies.
Now that would be a game changer.
Would. But as exciting as all these advancements are, safety has to remain the top priority.
Of course.
So as technology evolves, the FAA and other regulatory bodies will need to adapt to make sure that safety keeps pace with innovation.
So it's an ongoing process?
It is. It's about constantly assessing risks, developing new standards, and working closely with the industry to make sure that aviation stays the safest mode of transportation.
So to wrap things up, we've taken this incredible journey through the history of flight, from those early dreams of soaring like birds to the amazing aviation system we have today.
It's incredible, isn't it? Just over a century ago, we were barely getting off the ground. And now we have these sophisticated aircraft and intricate air traffic control networks. It's truly a testament to human ingenuity, perseverance, and our fascination with the skies.
Absolutely. And as we look to the future, one thing is certain, that human desire to explore, to push boundaries, will continue to shape the world of aviation for generations to come.
It will. And it makes you wonder what those future generations will achieve. What new heights will they reach? What incredible innovations will they come up with? If you could design the future of flight, what would it look like? Would it be about flying even faster? Or would it be about making flight more sustainable, more accessible to everyone? It's something to think about, isn't it? The possibilities really are endless.
Well, on that note, we'll bring this deep dive to a close. But keep those questions in mind. Let your imaginations take flight. And who knows, maybe someday you'll be part of shaping the future of aviation. Thanks for joining us.